Hey everybody, Phil Gonzalez here. Just a heads up that the audio on this week's episode isn't quite as crystal clear as it usually is. That's because I have to use the Zoom recording because even though Christy and I always record our audio tracks separately, because of the weird delay on Zoom and the distortion of like time from New York to Minneapolis, they just don't line up. They don't line up at all. I tried and tried. I tried cutting and pasting. I tried chopping. Doesn't work. If you layer the two audio tracks on top of each other, they sync up until they don't. And in fact, it's weird. I think this just goes to show that time is an illusion and none of us are sure of what reality actually is. We're all just groping in the dark trying to figure out our places in the universe. And that includes when you're recording an episode about Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. So the sound is fine. It's just I'm upset about it, so I needed to be upset with you. Enjoy this podcast about Twilight. You'll love it. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. Goodbye.
Got it.
All right, so
it asks you to whether you want to leave immediately or you're okay with it. I guess in case.
Would you like
in case you do not want to be here.
Live long and prosper or die immediately and decay?
All right. 3, 2, 1, go. Hello and welcome to Vampcast, where we talk about all our vampire needs.
It's actually called Vampcast because we're a couple of vamps who lead men
vamping.
on.
We love doing a little like blue skying, a little improving.
Oh, I see. You're thinking of that kind of vamp, like keep the audience engaged.
That's not the kind of vamp you were thinking of. I know.
No, I was thinking more Marlena Dietrich. You're thinking more like Horatio Sands.
Yeah, I'm usually thinking about Horatio Sands. Is anyone from SNL ever in the Twilight movie?
I mean, no, I don't think so.
Do you remember when Kristen Stewart hosted SNL? It was really good.
I remember when Twilight movies consisted almost entirely of people I'd never heard of before.
It's really interesting to have watched the career tragectory of two of the people in the Twilight franchise, the two main guys.
Cam Gigantic and someone else. I don't know.
The woman that did play Victoria in the first one, but did not play her once she became an actual character. When they're like, how about Bryce Dallas Howard instead? We'll get there. We'll get there. Actually, by the way, this podcast is called Pizza Toast. We talk about middle grade and YA books and the adaptations thereof. Usually there's a female protagonist. And today we're going to stretch the definition of protagonist. And my name is Christy.
My name is Phil. And before we get into this, I just wanted to let you know that at my bookstore where I work, we got the entire Georgia Nicholson series in. Someone dropped off the entire, just a stack of books of Georgia Nicholson books. I was very pleased.
What I wouldn't give. I see that you have. Is this the box set of the movies or the books?
Oh, this is the box set of the Blu-rays. It's every movie, including the extended editions and like every bit of bonus content ever made for them. It's most of it's unwatchable because it's just bland EPK features of people saying how awesome it is to be working on a Twilight movie when you can tell they're just gritting their teeth until the camera goes away. But
an interesting thing, I feel like Robert Pattinson was one of the first people brave enough to talk about how much he hated being in a franchise movie.
It's also one of those disc sets where there's discs under discs, so you've got to like pop out one disc before you can take out the actual disc. But this is a lot of discs. I don't care
for that at all.
Look at all the discs.
There's also an image of Renesmee, a character who is currently but a glimmer in the eye, the faraway eyes, the faraway topaz eyes of Edward and Bella.
A character who was instantly the butt of a joke just as soon as the book was published. Speaking as soon as the book was Speaking of as soon as the book was published, did you know that she conceived of this novel and had a $750,000 advance in 6 months? That she had never written a book in her life, had never finished a story in her life, sat down, wrote this story with her sister helping her out, and within 6 months had a $750,000 contract for additional books. And the book was already being shopped around movie studios and she's been rich ever since. Like her first thing she ever wrote. This is the first thing she ever wrote. She was not a writer. She never intended to be a writer. She just apparently had a dream, and that dream was, what if a girl kissed a vampire? Woke up the next day, and while her kids were at swim class, was like, I'll just start writing a novel. And then her sister was like, I keep writing it. And so she's like, I wrote a little bit every day. In a month or so, I was kind of done. Started sending it out to publishers. None of them liked it. Then one of them did. And they were like, this is good. Here's almost $1 million. You know, the classic writer story.
I mean, you do know. But like, I work at a literary agency. Every day, I see how much authors are offered for their advances. That's a very big number. It's like a really, really big number, particularly for a debut author, particularly for a debut author in a genre that at the time was fairly maligned, was basically non-existent in the YA space. Like, yes, there were other supernatural stories, but vampires were a largely untapped market, and this ushers in obviously an enormous trend in that area. But that is $750K is so much money, and this was 2007, 2008. So it's even more money now.
This was before then, because the movie's 2008, and it took several years.
You're right.
I believe the movie came out the same year that Breaking Dawn came out. So this was already...
It did, because I was able to read all of them before, like a homework. For a movie that maybe didn't deserve such a thing, but like I'm so I really like this book. That's a thing that I have to disclose immediately, but it's not because it's good. I just really like it. I was really hoping to reappraise the movie, and I fear that I was unable to do so.
I did reappraise the movie. I only watched this movie the first time like a couple of years ago when it was like on Netflix or something. And at the time I was like, you know what? This movie's not great, but it's weird, and I appreciate how weird it is. This time I watched it and I was embarrassed for myself watching it. I was like, this is a humiliating exercise in bad filmmaking all around. It's just every element of this movie does not work. It just works again. There's like one moment that I was like, right on. And then the rest of it, I was like, absolutely not. I don't understand.
Was it when Muse's supermassive black hole kicked in and there was vampire baseball?
Did you know that Muse is one of Stephenie Meyer's inspirations, one of her favorite bands?
I did know that. That is one of the things I did. I think I also I should disclose this up top because I hinted at it, but I don't think I was clear enough on the prior episode. I didn't self-identify as a Twihard. I wouldn't have used that word, but absolutely I saw this movie at like a 12:15 showing the day it came out. Like, I stayed up late to go see Twilight in the theater when I was a senior in college. I had read all of the books. I had a t-shirt with the Cullen crest on it. It was really hard for me to say that out loud just now. I was like so staunchly Team Edward. It got to the point where like I held everyone in my life, not to like an impossible standard, but definitely was like comparing notes. Like, is there anybody like this beautiful vampire boy? Can I meet them? I didn't at the time. The movie was bad too. Like, I didn't think the movie was good. I watched it. I giggled through the entire thing. The people on my other side were high school students who at first were annoyed at me for daring to make fun of it. But then by the end of the movie, we were all yucking it up because they recognized it was bad. None of us were over the age of 20 at this time. Like, all of us recognized that this was not a good thing. And I will still go to bat for things about the book, but the movie is bad. It's really bad.
I will say the movie. Okay, well, we're covering both the novel and the movie.
Yeah.
You were, as you have noted, you were fully in on this. How old were you when the book dropped?
This is like 2005 or so, 2006.
Yeah, 2000 something.
I don't know. The ebook is somewhere. I have the books in hardcover, but I
the
think
book came out in 2000.
House.
The book came out 2005, October, and then 2006.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I would have been graduating from high school. I would have been 17 and then turning 18 at the end of the year. So
okay.
I was Bella Swan's age.
You were
Bella Swan.
Kristen Stewart's age, because she was a child.
I was also Kristen Stewart's age. It's interesting that I was. So I could identify. Bella is a character, sorta. Mm-hmm. I was right in the pocket though. Like I would say it was mostly high school and I would say younger college age girls who were very into this. And then you do have the whole Twi mom stereotype. And I imagined it was much the same scenarios I experienced in my home where I read these books, I consumed them. My mom and I had done the same with Harry Potter a few years before. And I said to her, I think you should at least try reading the first one, the same thing I did when you told me to read Sorcerer's Stone, because I think you're really going to like it. It's not the same thing, but I can't stop reading them. And lo and behold, the same thing happened to her. And this was in 2008. So she also found them all consuming for a bit. Mom's Team Jacob, as I recall, which is always difficult, you know.
You cannot be Team Jacob after the first novel because he's barely in it. He's
embarrassing in the first novel.
Because he's a little child. He's just a child. I mean, they're all children.
He's a child, and I know that they're, like, in the movie, they kind of have to tease that he's going to have to be taken more seriously. But in the book, it's clearly not the intent. Like, right. This is just, like, this is a boy that has a crush on Bella. This is a boy whose father wants to murder Edward Cullen in the streets. And that is actually a way more interesting point of conflict here than Jacob is at any point.
Yes. The classic werewolves versus vampires conflict. Werewolves and vampires are either mortal enemies. We actually watched the first werewolves episode of What We Do in the Shadows last night. And they're either mortal enemies or werewolf plays drums in Dracula's band. Like that is it's either or.
The Underworld franchise is at points very focused on the werewolves versus vampires dynamic. Underworld is a really fun campy take on this. It could not be further from what Twilight is in a lot of ways.
I feel like Underworld is almost a reaction to the popularity of Twilight and the Twilight movies, because this novel, but especially once the movies came out, started this sort of cultural weirdness of the my vampires don't sparkle, like bro, like horror weirdos who felt like this, like the idea of a romantic vampire who could walk out in the sun was like taking something away from them, even though a legitimate horror reader would know that Dracula was not allergic to sunlight. Dracula could walk around in the daylight. He just lost his supernatural powers. Like the idea of a vampire disintegrating in the sun was a very late pop cultural thing. This vampire novel, she only introduces a few new concepts to the vampire. One of them is there's something wrong with my skin and it reflects sunlight strangely.
I think that the new concepts she adds to the lore are really fun. Like, it's all just the silliest things. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so I was thinking about, so Jasper, we'll get to him, can subtly affect the moods of other people.
Yes.
On What We Do in the Shadows, they can hypnotize people.
Right.
Uh, these are both like they are something. Like on the Vampire Diaries, they do the same thing where they can compel people to do different
Yeah.
things, and this is like pretty common piece of lore. But I love that the vampires are like specific superhero powers. Like
So
I love that eventually we're gonna meet one who's like a firebender.
this is literally once you're like they can walk around in the sun, they just look weird when they do. This is just the X-Men. Like this is just the X-Men. It is a group of superpowered teenagers with an adult who sort of keeps them secret, that there's like also bad versions of them, but they don't have to eat people. They can eat animals just like the X-Men eat animals. uh,
Just
uh
like that, yeah.
they're just like the animals. Sometimes they get angry like Wolverine or whoever. Like they're just superheroes at this point, but they don't do anything good for anyone. That's the only difference, is they don't actually try to make the world a better place. They're just
I'm
rich
going
and
to
enjoying
disagree
their
with
wealth.
that one point because Carlisle is the doctor in a sleepy peninsular town, and he's doing a great job. Carlisle, I remember Peter Facinelli being very like a very calming presence, a very like ethereally handsome, but like what he is on the page, he is in the movie, and I appreciate that. I actually think everyone is trying their best in the movie. Like every actor feels pretty committed to me.
You say ethereally handsome. I think he looks like Hermie from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
I think he's so pretty. I think everybody is uh the makeup is bad. The makeup is bad in the first movie, particularly. There's a
Yeah.
really there's a huge issue with blending. So like this is one of the more typical things about the vampires she has created is that they're all very beautiful, but also sort of haunting to look at. Like there's something off about them.
Yeah.
She does a fun thing where their eyes change color depending on how hungry they are. And uh Edward's eyes are any number of different colors depending on how Bella is feeling in the moment. Bella writes like a 16-year-old girl does about her first boyfriend so
Yeah.
convincingly. I love that. That's one of the things that I like so much about it. But like they all look a little odd, and no one wants to approach them, and they don't want to be approached by anybody in their high school. And in the movie, they've cast really good looking people. Of course they have.
Yeah.
But it's hard to think that they're attractive when they do look so odd, in particular in this. They get better at it as the movies
Well,
go.
well,
But
and the
like
books
Robert
have the
Pattinson is good looking no matter what. But yeah.
I was going to say the books have the benefit though of being able to just say that they're good looking, but also you know that they have some kind of power, that there's a what's the fairy power called, where a glamour. They have a glamour about them. So they're just attractive to everyone. Like Edward says it. He's like, you're prey, and one of our powers is we attract you to us. That's how we feed on people. Like like animals will just walk up to them if they want, because that's how they get food. And so they're not required to be super good looking, which is good because they look like a problem in this movie. Like they look like a genetic misstep, which again, they're not people. They're goblins in this story. They are creatures. And one of my favorite things about this is the book, not so much the movie, but the book is very much about, here's a girl who's attracted to this boy. They are completely different creatures. She's trying to learn more about his life, and he's trying to learn more about her. Edward has been so divorced from being a human for so long that he's trying to figure out what it means to be a person again. And I don't think Stephanie Meyer does a great job at establishing that, but it's there in the dialogue where he's frustrated and he gets angry all the time because he's not human. And this is very like her moods and her wants and her desires are very strange to him. And you sort of see them playing this game where they're just trying to figure each other out. The movie is very weighted towards her trying to figure him out, as opposed to him giving it all in the other direction.
It is true that she's weirdly almost too subtle with making the point that he is trying to figure out how to be a boyfriend. Like it's
Yeah.
his whole thing is that so Edward died of the Spanish influenza. I just want to use his phrasing,
Not the
not the more
flu.
commonly phrased Spanish flu. He died in Chicago in I think it says he's 1918, or I mean he was resurrected by Carlisle at that point. Because how much do we even have to say about this plot? Bella Swan, clumsy, beautiful, every boy is in love with her. She doesn't know why, but that it is how it is. Moves to the rainiest place in the continental United States. That is how Stephenie Meyer determined where to set the books. She Googled rainiest place in the United States, and voila, Forks, Washington. She makes some friends. She hangs out with her cool dad. uh, he's not cool at all, and that is what makes him so charming. We love Charlie. She goes to school and she meets a family of vampires, but it takes her a while to meet the family of vampires because one of them wants to eat her so badly that he has to go away for a week in order to collect himself before he can come back and woo her. And he is also quite taken with her. And then some bad vampires come to town and try to eat Bella. It doesn't happen. That's the entire book.
You should point out though that the bad vampires show up. Well, it's actually just one bad vampire. It's
there's three vampires and one of them is bad. Yeah, that's fair.
One of them is bad, but he's also bad because he has history with one of the other vampires. It gets very needlessly complicated why a vampire would want to eat a person.
I had fully forgotten that he had any beef with Alice. The Cullens are, let's see, Carlisle and Esma are like the paternal and maternal figures, and then Alice becomes Bella's best friend. Jasper is her partner. He's kind of a weird little guy. We'll learn more about Jasper in the long run. Also was in the Confederacy, because lots of vampires had to be in the Confederacy for some reason. So weirdly common trait through vampire lore. Princess Weeks has a very good video essay about why are there so many fictional vampires in the Confederacy. And then Rosalie and Emmett are characters that don't really matter but are there. They also live with the Cullens. And then there's Edward. And there's
wasn't Rosalie originally betrothed to Edward? Like she was taken to be his. Wasn't that her thing? Or
they tried, but it just didn't take. So they didn't have chemistry. And then Rosalie ended up finding
pandas in the zoo. They couldn't figure it out.
It's very strange that Carlisle kind of collects misfits. It's like people who are on the brink of death, and he knows there's it's kind of not that kind of him, because being a vampire seems awful. Although in this universe, being a vampire seems way cooler than it is in a lot of fiction. You get to like run through trees, although they don't do nearly as much of that in the book as they do in the movie. There's running, but no. Bella hates it.
Hey, yeah, it's because they figured out how to make it look so good that they just had to keep putting more of it in this movie because it's one of the best special effects. Can I just point out that the scene in What We Do in the Shadows where they're fighting the werewolves is not only better staged than any confrontation in this movie, the special effects are better than any special effects in this movie. The filming is better. Like the camera work in a 5-minute sequence from a TV budgeted comedy looks better than anything in this somewhat big budgeted Hollywood film.
Not just a TV budgeted comedy, that now it has a devoted following, but at
You're
the
right.
time was not like at the time we were this episode was not that popular. It was kind of word of mouth popular and had no name stars on it, unless we're counting Matt Berry as a name star, which he should be by all rights, but I don't think he was then. I
No.
remember getting very resentful when suddenly everyone had a crush on Matt Berry. It's like, I have been here since the IT crowd and the Mighty Boosh, people.
How dare you not mention Garth Marenghi's Dark Place?
Oh no, you've seen my Garth Marenghi's Dark Place mug, right? I use it
Yes. Oh, yes.
constantly in the winter. I make it. Yeah, it's one of my all time favorite things. As soon as you find out a person is familiar with Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, they automatically become a better person.
Yes.
Okay,
Uh,
so Twilight.
Twilight. Yes, they make it into a movie. This movie almost didn't happen. I guess MTV got their hands on it first and hired a screenwriter who turned it into an action comedy or an action movie. At one point, Bella was being chased on a jet ski by the FBI. Like it was. Stephanie Meyer said that it just was in name only. It had nothing to do with the novel because, again, the novel this was optioned before the novel was published, so no one thought this was going to be anything. It was just an interesting idea. They were like, "What if a girl fell in love with a vampire?" No one's ever done that before, I guess. But they also didn't think you could have a larger budget special effects movie that wasn't targeted towards boys. So you had
Right.
to have it had to be an action movie. And I'm going to tell you that even though this movie stone cold rips a character's head off and throws its heroine through a plate glass window, this is not an action movie because it looks like it was staged by third graders. So not an action movie.
It is crazy that someone gets their head twisted off. I had forgotten about that. I would like to. Okay, I had to tell you about my experience of watching this movie. I actually owned it, like a digital copy, from the heady days of Riff Tracks. So I
Oh,
was able to watch it without it streaming anywhere. This movie is not streaming anywhere except Stars. So unless you
yeah, it
have a
comes and goes.
Star subscription or you own it, you got to be illegal about it, and I did not. So I felt really good about that. Um, I watched the first hour of this movie and was sure it was almost over. It's like, surely this movie must be close to done. Listener, it was not. I paused it. I did a couple hours worth of laundry, cleaned my house a bit. Maybe I made myself a gin and tonic. Maybe I finished reading a better book. I did do that. I did all of those things, and then I came back to it at like 11:30 and finished it out.
Christy, as I finished this movie on the treadmill at the gym, uh, and
That's
was
even
like,
better.
oh, there's 12 minutes left. As we entered the epilogue, I was like, wait a minute, how long is it going to take them to walk into this prom? It took a while. It took a while to walk into prom. Uh, I am happy. The movie does a few things that I think beef up the story a little bit. The movie has the bad vampire show up well before he does and so there's murders happening in the town that her father, who's the chief of police, is trying to solve. They don't actually ever do anything with this, but it at least establishes in a more well-constructed storyline, the audience would be led to believe that the Cullens actually are killing people. Like it's a thing they claim we don't kill anyone, but people are being killed by vampires. Then the bad vampire shows up, or it's not even a bad vampire. Just they're on someone else's territory, and the Cullens are weirdos for not eating humans. So they establish that. They also don't make her being taken to the prom a complete lie and gaslighting thing that Edward does to her. They're just going to prom. Or in the book, it's not prom. Is it a dance? I think it's just a
It
dance.
is prom. It is
Oh,
prom.
is it? Okay. I was
I
confused.
read it very recently.
I'm confusing it with Radio Rebel. I'm sorry.
It's not Morp. If only we could get a Morp in there. I like this book and this movie more than Radio Rebel. Although, the movie, there's no funny hats in the movie. Oh, that's too bad. It's a
No.
disappointment to us all. I do want to. I want to say that Charlie is. I think Billy Burke is maybe giving my favorite performance in this movie.
He's in another movie. He's certainly in a different
He's
film. He's in a cop movie. He's in a small town, a cozy mystery. He's in like a Murder
yeah,
She Wrote
yeah.
episode.
Is that bad?
No.
Billy Burke and Anna Kendrick, and actually all of like the little high school cadre, I think are fun. Like I think they're having a good time. I think they did an exceptionally good job of casting Mike Newton, the puppy dog boy who has a very big crush on Bella. I think one of the edits I would make to the book, and yes, I would make many, is that not every boy has to be in love with Bella for it to be annoying that boys have crushes on her. I
Right.
think just Mike would have been. I think Mike would have fit the bill because he's the most fun. He's the most oblivious. In the like, if we're talking like in the book, she basically says to him, Anna Kendrick is directly in front of you and like prancing about and doing a mating dance. Just go out with her instead, for the love of God.
Yeah, this is Anna Kendrick's first movie role, really, and her first lead, definitely. And she is still at like cutie patootie phase. Like she's still like a
Oh
young
yes.
performer. And but yeah, if like the fact I guess the idea is that Bella is new, and so that's what's like no one moves to Forks. And
Mhm.
she's coming from Arizona, so she's a little like she's weird and mysterious. And I think that's kind of what they're going for, is that these kids have all been going to school together since kindergarten. Here's this new person, so the boys are all like attracted to this new person. But yeah, it comes across as a little psychotic, especially in the film, that they're just constantly on her.
I think this is one of the reasons the story gets levied with like Mary Sue critiques, because I actually think Bella has more. This time reading it, I thought Bella had more of a personality than I did the first time. Like she's a decent
Yep.
head on her shoulders. She's smart. She's sarcastic, but learns to tone it back once she moves to Forks, when she realizes that people there don't really get her. And it's not like other girls' way. It's just that she's a little awkward, and it isn't there just to be like a personality trait. It's just she's a little uncomfortable in her skin and learning how to be comfortable. And the way her internal monologue works, even before Edward really notices her, is a very authentically teenage girl. Like, I think Stephanie Meyer was able to step into this, like, how many times are we? I feel like eventually we're going to have to broach the topic of horniness in these books, because she is so into this boy the second she finds him mysterious.
Hmm.
And that is a and then as his mystery chips away, and as they get to have so many conversations where she just gets to stare at how incredibly ethereally beautiful he is, just falls deeper and deeper, and it becomes more and more convincing to me.
Yeah, as you said to me off mic, this is a romance novel. It's written like a romance. It indulges in the romance, which again, I think is, as you said, one of the things that people really harped on was that it was a kid's romance novel. But that's a genre and a style of writing and a focus of writing in and of itself that I think just a lot of people weren't familiar with. Uh,
Oh,
I'm
for
not a
sure.
I'm not a huge fan of romance novels. Mitzi really is, and they don't push my buttons. But I don't have anything against them. And reading this, I was like, oh, this is just a romance novel. He just happens to be a vampire, as opposed to this is a vampire novel that they've added some romance to. This isn't an Anita
Mhm.
Blake story. This isn't like a woman banging
No.
werewolves. This is a young adult romance that is about as chaste but horny as teenagers are.
Yeah, I think the chastity is one of the things that makes it so fascinating too, because there are definitely books I reached for when I was a teen and then was scandalized by, because they went so much further than I thought they would. Twilight never goes any further than a boy running his mouth, like his lips, over a girl's neck without actually kissing her, like, and it is all very sweet. I found this really charming this time, because maybe because I've read much more romance at this point. I read some contemporary romance, I read some like mid-list publishing. I read some like less kind of like less commercially successful romance, the kind that slips through the cracks but is very well regarded among fans of those
Mhm.
writers. Uh I don't really like smutty stuff. So maybe that's part of why this still appeals to me so much. And there's this hint that yeah, eventually we're going to go there. We're going to have to go there. But when Bella talks about sex, she does it with such a high level of innocence. And Edward finds this insanely charming. Like Edward finds everything Bella does hypnotic, to a somewhat ridiculous extent, but again, like romance kind of
Again,
romance.
he has a superpower, which is the ability to read minds. And she
Mm.
is the one mind he can't read. Like, that's what initially weirds him out about her, but also because he doesn't know what she's thinking all the time, which is a great metaphor for just being a teenager with a crush on someone and just constantly second guessing what they're thinking. Like, that's a pretty cool metaphor for being a teenager, is you want to know what's going on inside the head of the person you have a crush on because you need to know what they're thinking about you, and you can't. And this is how he's lived his life. Human beings are a food source that you can't touch, and they are fools because they're constantly just thinking ridiculous things. And then all of a sudden, here's a blank slate. I actually have to talk to this person to get to know them. And yeah,
Right.
that's a kid thing you have to learn, is eventually that girl, that guy that you want to smooch, eventually you're going to have to stop smooching and get to talking, or else you're going to break up in the theater library and your high school and finally have a conversation after you've broken up. And you're going to say, Lee, we probably should have had this conversation before we dumped each other. And she'll say, I know, too bad it's too late. And then you'll say, guess so. And you'll move
We're
on
getting
with
a
your
little
life.
too like we're scratching a little bit below the surface here, I think.
High school romance. That's okay. She's a
It is a
minister
neat trick.
now. It wouldn't have worked out.
Oh, that's so sweet. It is a neat little trick she pulls off because you also have this element then where Edward will listen to conversations she's having and he can hear the thoughts of the person she's talking to. So he has that kind of, he also has like super hearing. But this is how he begins to realize Bella's not always going to tell the truth to everyone. She's not going to be forthcoming to everyone, which makes her even harder to read than she would otherwise be.
Yeah.
Because if she were forthright, then maybe he could get a beat on her, but he can't. And this does, spoiler alert, end up being Bella's superpower. No vampire can read her mind, even the
Yeah.
most powerful ones, even like the Volturi, who are big bads. Can't wait to meet them. There is a passing mention of the Volturi in this book that I did not remember. That makes more sense when you find out, as you told me, that this was originally planned to just be 2 books.
So what Stephanie Meyer says
And
is that
yes,
the plot of Breaking Bad, or whatever it's called, Breaking Dawn,
freaking done.
was originally her idea for the second book. And she was tied into a contract for 3 novels. And so she
Mm.
needed to write something in between the 2 stories, which ended up being 2 books in between the 2 stories, but is also one of the reasons why the 2 books between this book and Breaking Dawn, some have said, seem a little stretched out, seem a little paced.
Eclipse has a lot going for it as far as like if you were looking for a love triangle then in this series, then that's the one you're going to want to go to. It's not necessarily good. New Moon is, I think, the weakest part of the series. And I know that Breaking Dawn is bananas. Like that
Yeah.
story is insane. But I think the insanity works better for it than what New Moon ends up being, which is like if you had to listen to a 17-year-old girl who'd just been broken up with for the first time, and you had to do so for several hundred pages, and you were never given a break, not even a single one.
Right. It's
bad.
Throughout the end of this book, we start wondering, what is it like when you turn into a vampire? 2 questions get answered. What is it like when you turn into a vampire? What would happen, and this is just theoretical, we find this out. What would happen if a vampire dude had sex with a human woman? The first thing is turning into a vampire is one of the single most painful things any living organism can experience. Something the movie does a pretty good job at showing as Bella gets bitten and she starts like getting infected with the blood, and Kristen Stewart just has to scream. And then what would happen if a human had sex with a vampire is they would get turned into paste. They would get plowed into non-existence is basically what Edward says to her. He's like, yeah, if I ever lose control of myself, you're just going to turn into a protoplasm because I'm just so strong.
I'm going to crush your head.
Yeah, this pelvis is going to be jackhammering with the force of an actual jackhammer. And I'm Mormon, and we can't be having that before marriage. And knowing
He's not
that
an abstinence vampire yet.
Knowing that
I do want to point
Meyer,
that out. I don't think the abstinence vampire thing really hits you over the head until the next couple of books.
I was going to say, knowing that Stephenie Meyer wanted the fourth book to be the second book, you can sort of see where she had to weave in a lot of like a place holding, like not to spoil the fourth book at all, but there's stuff where you're just like, well, now I got to figure out why these two really can't hook up. And also why Bella just can't turn into a vampire because it seems awesome.
Yeah, it seems really good. It seems like she would maybe be less clumsy. Like any flaw, any character flaw that Bella has would probably be gone if she became a vampire. So it's so funny how cool they make it seem. Because like every time they talk about Rosalie in this book, all they talk about is how she looks mad and she's so hot. Like she's not a mean girl, but she's so mad at Bella all the time. It's like this is barely restrained fury, but she's so hot. It's okay because she's so hot.
And in the movie, she's always angry at Bella, and she so looks like a knockoff Brie Larson. She looks.
Nikki Reed, who is actually like a. I mean, like, the interesting bit of lore about Nikki Reed and vampires is she is now married to Ian Somerhalder, who was one of the vampires on The Vampire Diaries, which is fun.
Good for her.
It's fun for everyone. Nikki Reed and Kristen Stewart became very, very good friends because of these movies, as
well,
I recall.
Great. I'm happy for them. She and Patrick, I almost said Patrick Stewart. She and Jason Patrick. What's his name? Robert Patrick?
Robert Pattinson.
She and Robert Pattinson became very good friends as well. Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson. In fact, I think that the tabloids had something to say about that.
This is also an interesting thing because, like, we haven't really talked about any franchises that, like, then bore a romance or a showmance. That's not a thing that we've really delved into at all. And this was not a showmance. Like, it is pointed out by Catherine Hardwicke that the director of the movie, that she was very insistent that Pattinson not take these feelings home with him. She was like, he's a little bit older than her.
Yeah.
He's like, she reminded him, she's a 17-year-old girl. She is a child. That cannot happen. Well, it happened. So they were together for a while. Kristen Stewart, now a queer icon of sorts, bisexual, has dated both men and women very publicly, is now either engaged or married to a woman and seems very, very happy. Robert Pattinson is an insane person in a positive way. I think in a great way. I think he's done a very good job of kind of lying to the press consistently about who he is and what he's doing. That there's this incredible Esquire profile of him that came out during the height of lockdown, in which Christopher Nolan is quoted as saying, yeah, he never tells the truth to press ever, and it's part of what makes him so interesting. And the Esquire ran with everything he said in the interview like it was gospel truth. It's really good stuff. He had open contempt for being in these movies by the end of them.
To a degree that I felt bad for Stephenie Meyer. Because he was bad mouthing it so much. It reminded me, speaking of vampires, of when Tom Cruise was cast as Lestat in Interview with the Vampire, in the opposite way, the way Anne Rice was bad mouthing Tom Cruise left and right for being a bad choice for the role. And then of course she sees the movie and she's like, oh no, he's actually phenomenal in the role. Uh, but
Mhm.
I was like, man, you're just what? There's people's feelings on the line here. Even Tom Cruise's.
I do think at the end of the day, it was probably that Pattinson felt stuck in a
Mm,
franchise, and
yeah.
he was also young. He's petulant about it, and then he had this kind of rocky road to then becoming sort of an indie darling. He's given some incredible performances. He's very good in the film The Lighthouse,
Mhm.
which I think would be a good double feature with Twilight. I don't know why, and I refuse to explain why, but I do think it would be. And he's been the Batman. He has been big tentpole characters again, but he's done it all in a very weird way. Yeah, I do wonder what Stephanie Meyer thinks about somebody like that, because I don't think Kristen Stewart was thrilled to be there by the end, but she was never a jerk about it, as far as I know.
Well, I think Kristen Stewart also was like, this is the beginning of my actual film career. Like she had been in a bunch of stuff before, Panic Room and
Mhm.
Zathura and other things, but this is her big breakout. And I think she was smart enough to sort of keep her. She's like, I'm just going to zip my lips until I'm sleeping with the director. I'm not going to say word one about any of this, about my thoughts on this project. Because she was young.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things about the Twilight, though, getting back to the actual story, is that people tend to confuse Kristen Stewart with Bella. And as you said earlier,
Mhm.
the Bella in the book is not Kristen Stewart in this movie. 90% of her lines is her going, "Ah, mm." Like she does
Phil's
that.
making a lot of good faces right now.
She has more quirks than late career Jeff Goldblum. She is she like all over this movie, and I'm like, oh, that's probably because she's a young actor and she doesn't really know her way around a character yet. But the Bella in the book is very lively and funny, and she's immediately like, first she's like, I can't believe I'm decided to move to Forks. But then like a page later, she's like, you know what? It's pretty great here. What an awesome truck. What a bunch of nice people. I'm gonna make the best
Yeah,
of this. And
this is the thing.
she's a more
It,
upbeat character.
she's competent as a person. Like, I mean, there's a little bit of that in the movie, or like a tiny bit of that in the movie. But like, she's a good student. She works ahead on projects. She makes her father dinner every night, and not in like a weird,
Right.
like a gender roles domestic way, but in a this is a man who's never taken care of himself in his life, so I'm going to be nice to him way,
Yeah.
which is very nice. I like their relationship. I like the dynamic of a father who is not like he hasn't been absent in her life. They've just not lived together, but he doesn't really know how to behave around her. And as such, they go from cordial to pretty warm by the end of
Mm.
the first book. And she does view him like he buys her a truck for her 17th birthday. And yeah, it's old, it's loud, it's orange, I think. She loves it. She's
Yeah.
so happy. And that doesn't come across in the movie that she is grateful for any way he treats her. They don't really have a dynamic at all in the movie. I don't know that this is either of the actors' fault. I think it's just not written into it. Like, I think there are things about this script that are really confusing to me. They leave out some of the more interesting details. Uh, there are things like there are these conversations that Bella has with individual Cullens that are so illuminating that they're just like, maybe we cut this out and focus more on the two of them staring at each other in a field wordlessly. Like
Yeah.
it's
Maybe we need
disappointing.
more baseball. Maybe we need more exciting running. Yeah. Uh I the screenwriter, I think, was under a lot of pressure um to conform to what the fans would want, like
Yeah,
to not shake things up too much and to show more Bella and Edward as opposed to more conversations. Uh so
but
it's
the
really
conversations
hard.
are the best.
The conversations are the story. But yeah, I think, did you watch the regular version or the extended version?
Oh, I watched the regular and it was still too long.
I think the extended version is like 2 minutes longer. And it's
It
mostly
doesn't
like,
matter.
did you know that Carlisle and Esme kissed in the extended version? They give each other a kiss.
I didn't
Like
know that.
that's the one
The
I
thing that they
watched.
cut with the thing they cut with Esma from the book is that there is like Edward is explaining how everybody in the Cullen/Hale household became a vampire. He says something about how Esma fell off a cliff. Bella sometimes doesn't question him when he's telling her something. This is clearly not true.
Right.
Esma very casually in conversation with Bella drops that she threw herself off that cliff because she had just lost her first and only child in like within like and not in childbirth but within a day or two of the child being born. And Carlisle found her after she after she didn't die.
Yeah.
And it's and she treats this extremely casually. It's like, yep, Edward would soften that story. That's just like him. Classic surrogate son, and then just keeps going. It's
Yeah.
so interesting and it's so odd.
Carlisle's insistence on only turning people into vampires if they're kind of already dying means that everyone has the most tragic like story because their life was already not going very well before Carlisle got his hooks in them. Also, but I like the idea that usually when a vampire is like, I don't want to kill people, I want to be good, I want to be a good person, they become a detective. You're either a forever knight or you're an angel or you're one of those guys. But Carlisle's like, no, I'm going to be a doctor. Not only am I going to help people, I'm just going to be surrounded by open wounds. Like my whole life, like I'm in a logging community. I guarantee you most of the injuries he sees are fingers off. And Carlisle is like, every day's a test for me. Every day is penance for me being an unholy goblin, a demon, a hell monster. I'm gonna force myself into the worst situation possible by being this town's only competent doctor.
The man nails it.
Yeah.
He's doing a really good job. It's a weird lore, and it's a lore that I enjoy. I enjoy the Cullens conceptually. I think as we get into New Moon, I will continue to show my hand as a Team Edward person, but I don't think that the Black family and that the spoiler werewolves are nearly as interesting. I don't think their lore is there. I think Bella learning about like as much as she does about the lore and getting drawn in by it isn't particularly convincing. And I think that like this book is the book is long in the tooth. Like it is like it goes on too long in the same way that the movie goes on too long, but not nearly to the same extent. But there's some good meat here. There's some stuff to chew on. It's really like the conversations in it for there are many conversations are cute. They are interesting. He asks the most earnest little questions of Bella, like, "What's your favorite color?" "Oh, it changes day to day. Explain why."
Yeah.
And occasionally dips below the surface, but not really. He just wants to know his new girlfriend. That's all he wants.
I think that this movie would have, this book and everything culturally would have made less of a splash, but also gotten less flack if they had been like like a fairy family, like Fae, which would have the same issue with rules and weirdness and like threat to humanity's lives, but wouldn't have the, oh no, this is supposed to be cool and violent, which the kind of the burden that vampire lore has. But as we discussed in the last episode, vampires can kind of fit in anywhere. You know, they can be monsters, they can be lovers, they can be airship captains. It doesn't matter. Like, you want steampunk vampires? Great. You want school teacher vampires? Fine. What would that be like? It's not really a genre. It's just a type of character. And this is romance vampires.
Mm-hmm. And I like them. Sometimes. I like them now. I like them in this specific context of the first book. I think they're fun. I think it's a quick read, despite being like too long for what it is. It's very. I didn't have that's a lie. I was like getting the feeling initially. Oh, I don't have the compulsion to keep reading this the way I did when I was 20. then I got really excited when my subway, like when the car I was on, got stuck for like a solid 15 minutes in a tunnel because it meant that I got to keep reading the book rather than like returning to my actual life. And that's I'm not saying that this is not in the tier of most of the books we read for this show.
It's
We've
no
read a lot of
bridge to
good books.
Terabithia.
It's no it's no Stargirl. It's no Pants. Like it's no
It's no
like
pants.
it's certainly no Georgia Nicholson, but it is something. It has something to it that I find very absorbing. And when I say that, though, I am only talking about the first book because we are going to have what I think is a pretty steep drop off. I don't think the second movie is as bad as the first movie because I think Chris Weitz is a pretty good director.
Well, what I was going to say is, so this movie, which cost only 37 million to make, so no wonder it
So
looks like
cheap.
hot trash. And
Yeah,
it
it's
does
bad looking.
look bad. I can't emphasize enough. This movie looks like it was filmed on a phone, not even a high-end phone, like a burner phone. It looks like it was filmed on like a phone that you give your kid so they can listen to Spotify.
It
There's a
has
weird
that. It
color
looks.
grading.
It Yes, the color grading is so weird. It looks like it was made in 2004 for television when everything was just a little green or blue. Like it just has this weird wash to it. And it makes all of the already kind of weird looking Cullens look weirder. Like yes, they're supposed to look otherworldly, but they look sickly because of
So what
this.
what I found out was it wasn't cloudy in where they were filming, like most of the time. So the idea was, well, we'll just have the Cullens, they can be in the sunlight. We'll just have them be in the sunlight. They didn't have the budget to do the sparkly skin because at the time, that was such an expensive special effect. Something you could do with a filter on Instagram now. At the time was so complicated, it would have broken the budget of the movie. So they had to, I guess, just put a filter over every daylight scene so it looked like it was cloudy, which means they just put a blue filter over everything. And it looks like, but that's not even it. The use of weird choppy slow-mo, I don't know if it's a Catherine Hardwicke thing. I mean, at this point, Hardwicke had done 13, which was her big breakout movie, which she co-wrote with an actual child. uh Lords of Dogtown, one of the great let's make a feature film based on a celebrated documentary movies that like people were like, okay.
Yes.
And then The Nativity Story, the what would it be like if Oscar Isaac and an actual child were Joseph and Mary uh birthing Jesus, in which Catherine Hardwicke was like, I did so much studying, I really want to tell the story. And then she does Twilight. It's a hit. And then no one ever wants to work with her again. And then she does Red Riding Hood and just kind of falls off the face of the earth with as far as like
Mhm.
pop cultural goes. And they hand the series to a bunch of guys who take it and run with it. And it's that unfair thing where like a woman does a multi-million dollar movie and then they hand the franchise off to a bunch of men. Uh, but also I think people had a bad experience making this movie and it kind of looks like trash. And so they kind of wanted,
Mhm.
I think, someone with more filmmaking experience behind the camera.
Yeah, it's nice that there is like I think switching directors was the only thing that they could do to make the like it wasn't it's just that the direction of the first one is so confusing to me and it looks so bad. And of course their budget is going to get beefed up for the second one because they make so much money. Like the returns are so good on the first one. This was such a tentpole movie, which I don't think they could have anticipated in the making that it was going to be that successful. Thank you. Phil sharing some visuals, some previs of Vampire Baseball. The
It's
art's are my
previs, it's
favorite.
previs of Vampire Baseball that honestly doesn't look any different in the actual movie. It looks this bad. It looks this bad. It looks like someone cooked it up in 10 minutes on their home computer. And they just got a bunch
Sure
of pretty
does.
they just got a bunch of pretty boys to do it. Sorry, I love that I had to rip this special feature off the Blu-ray turn it into an AVI, load it into video editing software, clip it, export it, just to turn it into this GIF, just so I could make you laugh for like 5 seconds.
Look, I think it was really important that you did that, and I appreciate that you did. That's all I'm getting.
Anyway.
What was I gonna say? I got nothing else. Is what I was gonna say.
Catherine Hardwicke, yeah. Into Chris Weitz.
Into Chris Weitz, who was instrumental in the making of American Pie and About a Boy. 2 movies I really love that I'm not going to say that American Pie couldn't be further from Twilight, because they are, like, roughly the same age. About a Boy is a very different movie from this. And I think
About a Boy
it'll be
also
interesting to rewatch this one, just because I saw this one a few times, I think, in the theater. We're at the point then, like, when I'm not in college anymore. These are more of a laugh at that point. Even though I still, like, had a lot of affection for them. I'm excited to talk about that one instead of this movie, where this movie is bad.
I'll say
it's
that
bad.
Watching this on the treadmill at the gym during the entire climax.
The optimized way, it's what Catherine Hardwicke would have wanted.
So in the climax of the movie, Bella is kidnapped by a vampire, and who tricks her into thinking he's kidnapped her mom by playing footage from a home movie he stole from her house of her mom going, Bella, where are you? Which Bella, over the phone, I guess, couldn't tell was her mom. Bites her. Everyone comes to her rescue. The only way you can kill a vampire in Twilight World is you dismember them and you burn their bodies. Otherwise, I guess
you have to take them apart, I guess.
That's what they say. You got to take them apart. Yeah. There's a behind-the-scenes footage,
it's very violent,
of Catherine Hardwicke demonstrating how she wanted what's-her-face to jump onto the body of the vampire and rip his head off. And the whole crew being like, whoa! And she's like, yeah, I think we should rip his head off. I think, who's the character? It's the female.
The one who gets his head ripped off? James.
No. Who's the female who rips his head off? It's what's her face?
Oh, Alice.
Alice.
Yeah.
Who doesn't do it in the book. Alice. That was Catherine Hardwicke's idea. She was like, I want Alice to have something to do in this scene. And that's pretty cool. Like, it's a very let the right one in moment where, like, the petite vampire leaps onto a body and just absolutely tears it apart. But also cool, that whole scene where they plow into the ground and, like, tear up the floorboards as they're plowing into the ground. And that's practical. Like, they did that on set. There's behind the scenes footage of, like, the boards that are, like, set up, and the people come in on their wires and, like, fly into it. It just tears up. Kind of cool. Good ideas. Shame it looks like someone's after school project in the long run. But also, because in the book, Bella passes out and then she wakes up in the hospital and she's like, what happened? And they're like, the guy bit you. We came in, we tore him apart, ripped his head off. It was all good. You're all fine now. And so in the movie, they have to, like, Lord of the Rings it and actually show you what happened, as opposed to...
Yeah, there has to be something actually visually interesting.
Yeah,
and they do their
best. Which it is. Best part of the movie, in my opinion.
I think that's the best scene. I think that... But it's also... it comes after so much dull material that it is hard to... it's hard to hang on there. But, that being said, sure is a movie. I don't know. I was gonna try to say something really nice about it.
I think that the two leads have chemistry. When they kiss, I totally buy it. I think their kiss at prom is a great movie kiss. I think this has good movie kiss in it. There was a scene that they filmed that was not put in, a moment where she was supposed to have a dream about Edward, where they end up making out on her bed. And you can watch that. You can watch that in the deleted footage. A little hot and heavy for a teenager. Like, I was like, I can see why they cut this. This is a little too much, but I totally bought it. I totally bought that Robert Patrick and Flo Rowe, or whatever her name is.
Keep calling him Robert Patrick, for my sake. Robert Pence.
Were actually into each other. I totally believe that they were into each other.
I've seen this cutscene. Of course, I've seen this cutscene. It's good. And they get to play that up a bit more. She has more chemistry with him than she has with Taylor Lautner, bless him. But I mean, I think that poor boy, he's doing great now.
He has such a nice smile. If
I'm
Taylor
so
Lautner,
excited to talk about Taylor Lautner today on next week's episode.
Yes. If Tay-Tay smiled at me across a crowded room, I would be like, I'm going to go talk to that boy because he has a winning smile. And he smiles a lot in this movie because he doesn't know what else to do. This is Shark Boy. Never really had, I guess, much direction. So he just smiles his way at Bella. Plus, he's with Kristen Stewart. How can you not smile at her?
I have some fun facts about him because we grew up in the same town. He's younger than I am, but we did not cross paths. So we'll hold on to that for next week.
I'm excited.
Pretty exciting stuff. But
speaking of next week, what's next week?
Next week is New Moon, the second book and film in the Twilight quadrilogy / quintology. Yeah, there it is. Oh, yours is gonna look great.
This one I think this must still be in my my player where I ripped the special features from.
I'm glad it belongs there. What are we saying goodbye to?
It's not in my player. I don't know. Oh, I unplugged my. Never mind. Sorry, I just distracted myself. What are we saying goodbye to?
I have an idea. I would like to say goodbye to our ballet studio because it got burned to the ground.
The ballet studio did get burned, much like Buffy's gym got burned to the ground. Well, it looks like we picked the best time to
because
end
they were
our
vampires.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Goodbye, ballet studio.
Goodbye, ballet. Yeah, goodbye, ballet studio.